Hi, I'm James, and I have borderline personality disorder, and I wanted to talk about anosognosia, and hopefully I'm saying the word right. I think I am, but anosognosia is a big deal in my life, and I think that my personal experience with it will help us to understand more deeply, perhaps, what it means and what it means in the life of somebody who has borderline personality disorder. Um, and so basically, I'm going to start with the definition, and then I will go into my personal story, and then I will talk about the neurological underpinnings that create the state of anosognosia in our life, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so anosognosia means a lack of awareness of an illness. Neurologically, it's not just denial. Okay, and that's really important to understand that. It's not denial, it is a failure of brain systems that allow us to perceive and integrate internal states, self concept, and feedback from others. It's commonly discussed in conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. It can happen to people who have a stroke, but a form of anosognosia can appear in people with borderline personality disorder. It is more subtle, emotional, and identity based rather than global or fixed. So, I'm going to get into my story, and it'll help you understand. And by the way, anosognosia is huge. This is a huge, important topic for us who have borderline personality disorder, and for us with family members. As you guys know, some of you follow my videos. I took some classes on borderline personality disorder with a world-renowned expert named Valerie Porr. That's Porr. And one of the greatest challenges in borderline personality disorder is acceptance, getting diagnosis, and basically the person who has borderline personality disorder understanding the complexities of the neurological disorder that they have and coming to terms with that through psychoeducation, proper skilled therapy, and family support and education for the family members and their support through that education. So anosognosia can be a really big deal because it can keep us from getting the help that we need because we don't realize we need help. And my story is a perfect example of that. So when I was growing up, I used to do all the trauma therapies for decades because, I had trauma in my childhood. I believed in therapy. I started seeing a therapist around 14 or 15 years old. Anyways, for decades, I was in and out of therapist offices and dealing with my childhood trauma. But what a lot of therapists failed to see, and what only those really close to me, like my ex-wife or my kids, could see, was my states of mind and some of my behaviors that were really harmful to myself or to others emotionally, that the therapists weren't aware of because they were dependent upon my own self-reporting of my own experiences, and I was not aware of. So let me give you some examples. I went into college and I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and that was the first time I was ever introduced to the concept of borderline personality disorder. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's terrible. What a horrible thing for people to have and to experience, right? No recognition of it in my own life. Later on down the road, one of my kids' therapists suggested to them that I might have borderline personality disorder. And so when that was shared with me, I went back and researched and looked into it, and I didn't do a lot of research, okay? I basically just looked some stuff up online about it to refresh because it had been a few years since I'd been in college, and so I was like, that's not me, that's not me at all. And then for personal reasons, I actually got into like learning a lot more about it and taking like the family classes and from Valerie Poor. She offered like family classes, and then she offered some advanced classes about borderline, like mentalization and stuff like that. But you had to take a family class first. Anyways, I'm taking all these classes. I'm getting really deep into this subject of borderline personality disorder. I am learning about it from the experts. I'm learning about the intricacies. I'm learning about how it's only those people usually you live with who even recognize that there might be something wrong with the person who has borderline personality disorder. I am learning all of these things and still not recognizing any of those things in myself. None of them. I spent, years reading research articles, studying about it, learning as much as I could. I mean, I'm a layman, right? I'm no expert, but I was trying to listen to the experts, and I mean the real experts. I'm not talking about these generic online therapists, and your generic therapists don't really understand borderline personality disorder, at least not. They don't understand the new information that's come out in the last several years, the work of experts in the field who spent their lives studying it. And so I'm learning all of this stuff. I am like almost obsessively learning about this disorder. I have no idea I have it. None. I don't recognize any of that stuff in myself. And anytime I do even kind of think that, oh, well, I can kind of identify with that, my brain is automatically, well, but I only am like that because of these other people, or this other thing that happened. You know what I mean? And so I could not neurologically see my symptoms and my behaviors and my thoughts clearly. I didn't even know some of the things that I was experiencing because they were so unconscious, right? And I am the poster child for anosognosia in borderline personality disorder because I had it right there. I was even in I was part of some advocacy groups. I was really, really involved in this world. You know what I mean? And had no clue that I myself had this neurodivergence, right? And anosognosia can impact us. So I wound up, sorry, I'm all over the place. Work with me. So I wind up having a huge psychosis episode when me and my ex got separated, and wound up in one of the best psychiatric hospitals in the country, Menninger, and great hospital, and they did all the tests. I mean, they really took their time with me. I had 3 psychiatrists, and they were all wonderful, lovely people. They did the brain scans, they did the EEG. It was very thorough. And then they tell me I have borderline personality disorder. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that's I couldn't believe it. I mean, I accepted it, but I didn't accept it. And I was still so confused by that, because I still didn't see it in myself. And so even after I got out of the hospital, I spent a long time just struggling with dealing with it. And one of the things too is a little bit of embarrassment, because I talked about this disorder before to family and friends, and dedicated so much time, but I have it. What? What's going on? This doesn't make any sense. And so I struggled with it, accepting it. And it wasn't until I would see signs of it, and it'd kind of start getting the more I explored my unconscious mind, the more I was taking time to write out things and thoughts that I was feeling, and the more I saw my interactions and how I was thinking. I am kind of quiet type borderline personality disorder. So I don't always have those big kind of outward reactions to people. But so it's not, it's a little easier sometimes to diagnose for somebody who's a little more outward reacting, than somebody with quiet type. And don't get me wrong, I'll outward react. Oh, I will. I will. Okay. But generally speaking, most of the time I don't. And most of the people out in the world, again, it's only obvious to the people who are, living with you, to the outward world, right? They seem like, oh, kind, and I'm thoughtful, and, I don't tend to even get upset most of the time. I've even been told, like, you never get angry, you never get upset, you need to stand up for yourself and stuff like that. And, but the truth is, I unconsciously, because of things like alexithymia, I didn't know what I was feeling, and unconsciously, I'm a raging storm of chaos and chaotic thoughts. But those emotions aren't always easily acceptable to me because of the neurological condition that is known as borderline personality disorder. So, and anosognosia can affect us in all kinds of ways. We can start to think that we're fine. We can start to doubt we've ever even had it. We could have accepted it for a while, and then we're like, we're recovered. We must be healed. We're good. It can, hit us short term where we cannot recognize that some kind of erratic, kind of non-neurotypical behavior is not normative. Right. And so it impacts us in a lot of really great ways. But it's important to understand the difference. It is not denial. It's not like there's an awareness, but somehow we've tricked ourselves into thinking it's something else. It is an actual failure of brain systems to communicate effectively and appropriately so that we can have the serious, internal states, the self-concept to see ourselves clearly. And even when we get feedback from other people, and usually, right, who's that feedback going to come from? It's usually the person we're actually having the moment with, or there's the behavior is towards. We're not going to see it. We're just going to see it as clearly all them. You know what I mean? So let's get into the neurological underpinnings of it. So what's happening in the brain? Anosognosia and BPD isn't usually due to things like in a stroke or an aneurysm. You can have structural lesions in your brain. But in BPD, anosognosia is due to functional dysregulation in networks that integrate self-perception, emotional regulation, and social cognition. So here's what to know. Frontolimbic dysregulation. The regions that are involved is the medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, the amygdala, the insula, and the temporoparietal junction, the TPJ. Sorry, I know I didn't say that correctly. I don't know how to say it, but I'm fairly certain I did not say that right. These areas coordinate emotional recognition, self-referential processing, and error monitoring. In BPD, the amygdala is hyperactive, so there's an emotional overload, distorted threat perception. Hypoactive dorsolateral prefrontal cortex has weak top-down regulation and difficulty reflecting on one's role in events. And then there's the altered anterior insula activity. This is impaired awareness of internal emotional states, interoception, contributing to, I don't feel like anything's wrong with me. And it's them, it's not me, right? So this makes it neurologically difficult to link emotions and behaviors in a coherent self-narrative, which is the foundation of having insight for neurotypical people. And we struggle with that, right? It's What did Marsha Linehan one time say? Um, you know, I can't remember how she said it, so I'm paraphrasing. But even in BPD people see even their own behavior as not their responsibility, right? Something along those lines. I'm probably messing it up. But in the default mode network, there's dysfunction. The DMN supports self reflection and autobiographical continuity. In BPD, it often shows fragmented activation. People may experience the self as disjointed or fluctuating. I feel like a different person from one day to the next. Or with the anosognosia, we could feel like we're always consistent, but other people are always different depending on the situation, right? You feel me? All right. I know I feel that way. So when the DMN is unstable, does the default mode network, insight can become state dependent. So it's based upon how we feel, right, in the moment. So when we're calm, we may be able to acknowledge issues, even take some accountability, right? When we're emotionally triggered, insight collapses, perception shifts to I am the victim, you're abandoning me, you're the cause of this. And this dynamic, this neurological switching contributes to episodic anosognosia, alternating between awareness and a total lack of awareness, right? The next thing in our brains, interior insula and self-awareness. The anterior insula integrates internal states like our heartbeat, our pain, our emotional arousal but the anterior insula integrates these internal states with subjective awareness. So in BPD, reduced insular activation correlates with alexithymia, which is difficulty in identifying and understanding feelings, and disassociation, right? This can result in poor recognition of internal instability. I don't feel out of control. You're just making me angry, right? It is not conscious denial. It is a neural blind spot. All right. And that's important to think about that. Okay. And especially for our loved ones. And if you have loved ones, and you have BPD, please share a lot of my videos, at least the ones about the traits of BPD, a lot of the brain stuff that I talk about with them so that they can understand you better, so that they can understand you're just not choosing to be like this, right? It's a neurological condition that is you are experiencing, and you don't have the same neurotypical luxuries that they have to try to interpret the world in their own inner and outward world, right? It's different for us. We're neurodivergent. It's a neural blind spot within us when this happens. So maybe some real life examples here that I wrote down. So everyday emotional blind spots. Okay, let's say a mother who has BPD lashes out at her daughter. And so later when she's calm, she might start to think that the daughter was just tired, right? Maybe when the instance happens, she thinks her daughter's being mean, her daughter doesn't like her, or her daughter doesn't love her, or something like that. But after all of the after she's able to really calm down, which in our case can take a lot longer sometimes if you have BPD, she's able to maybe reflect and think that maybe potentially her daughter was just tired, which is why she behaved that way. So what we're experiencing here is during the emotional peak, the amygdala-driven threat perception overrides the prefrontal and insular circuits needed for empathy and the ability to reflect. Afterwards, as the DMN reconnects, insight slowly returns, but shame or defensiveness may block repair. All right. And this is important, right? Because sometimes, right, we do stuff as people with BPD. Like we'll do something, we'll have this reaction to something. We're angry at somebody, they hurt us, they don't love us, something like that. And then we can calm down and start to become aware that somebody did that maybe there was another way we could have interpreted something. And then we could get hit with the shame and the defensiveness, and then that could keep us from actually trying to fix or repair or apologize. And this can contribute, right, to us splitting black, right, and then just cutting off a relationship completely, right? So here's a moderate example: therapy resistance. A person insists that therapy isn't helping. My therapist just doesn't understand me. Though others in our lives might be observing progress in us because of the therapy. So neurologically, during distress, self-other integration fails, and the brain cannot hold both truths. I am improving, and I still feel bad, right? And so both of these things can coexist, but because of the way we are neurologically wired, we have a hard time seeing that. So this is a classic like BPD splitting dynamic. It leads to splitting, and it's tied to the self-awareness network dysregulation in our brains. And then tragic, the worst cases, scenarios of anosognosia is relationship, or maybe even legal crises, or anything involving really dark stuff. Okay, I don't want to say too much because I don't want anybody to be triggered, but someone with BPD believes their partner's boundary is a total rejection and reacts by maybe sending really angry texts and messages, maybe through some kind of self behavior that's really dark. Then and maybe later they realize that they might have been overreacting, and then that can sometimes lead to the shame and all that other stuff like that, or splitting black, or doing something that's tragic, I guess we could say. At the time, their neural self-reflection network essentially goes offline, right? The tragedy lies in acting from that unawareness. So if they don't know that that's a possibility, if they don't know that they can have anosognosia temporarily, that they don't understand that they cannot be interpreting. There's a potential that they're not interpreting things in the world around them correctly. Then they can do things that can do so much damage to relationships. I can do so many things that are so damaging to relationships and to myself. And because of that, and things that are sometimes really hard to come back from. So I say all this. Why does this stuff? Why is it important for us to understand how our brains work and topics like anosognosia? It's reducing stigma, man. Knowing that there's anosognosia and BPD, that it's neurological, it's not moral. It reframes the behavior as an issue of a brain state dysregulation, not willful denial or manipulation. Okay, and this is important for neurotypical people to understand. They think of the world through neurotypical mindsets, and so they interpret things that we do through a neurotypical lens, right? And so it is not willful denial, it's not manipulation. It helps guide treatment. Therapies like mentalization-based therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy specifically target state-dependent insight loss. Okay, it's important for us to get the right therapies, and I will champion, and the research has proven that mentalization-based therapy is where it's at. And understanding this helps, it prevents escalation, right? So when families and clinicians understand that insight can fluctuate with emotion, they can respond with validation and grounding instead of confrontation, preventing crises. I have to tell you, it is so imperative for us to educate to educate therapists, to educate our families, to educate ourselves first, primarily, so that we can understand what's going on here, so that we can prevent escalation, especially when it comes to, you know what I'm talking about, the dark stuff. And when it comes to keeping our families together and keeping the love and keeping and having a system of support for ourselves. And it's so terribly important to understand these things. So thank you so much. I know this is a longer video than I normally do, but it's such an important topic. And if you have BPD, just remember, you know, you've got a tricky brain, all right? And you didn't choose this. And if you are a family member, just keep the love, the compassion, the support. Try to understand, get yourself educated, and seek out information from experts in the field. And I say experts like Valerie Porr, Porr, Anthony Bateman, Peter Vagany. There are many people, not a lot, but there are many people who have really worked very hard to try to understand this disorder and do the research, look at research studies. Okay. And there will be some studies about this topic in the video description for this. Anyways, I hope everybody's doing well. Okay. And hang in there. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer. All right. Take care.